The sledgehammer felt heavy in Marcus's hands as he stared at the concrete that had once been his daughter's favorite place in the world. 3 years of medical bills had drained everything: the college fund, the retirement savings, even hope itself. But Karen Whitmore next door didn't see a father making an impossible sacrifice. She saw property values dropping. When the police cars pulled into his driveway with sirens blazing, Marcus realized that some neighbors would rather destroy you than understand you. What Karen didn't know was that Marcus had just received a phone call that would change everything. And her petty vindictiveness was about to backfire in ways she never imagined. Marcus Chen had always prided himself on keeping his emotions in check, but as he stood in his backyard with a sledgehammer in his hands, tears mixed with sweat on his face. The in-ground pool that had cost him $30,000 to install 5 years ago now looked like a monument to better times before the diagnosis, before the endless hospital visits, before watching his 8-year-old daughter fight for her life. "Dad, are you sure about this?" His 16-year-old son Jake stood beside him, his voice cracking with the weight of understanding that came too early. "Maybe we could find another way." Marcus wiped his face with the back of his work glove. "The contractor's coming Monday to fill it in. Insurance doesn't cover experimental treatments, son. This is what we have to do." The pool had been Emma's sanctuary. Even after the leukemia diagnosis, even through the chemo that left her weak and nauseous, she'd insisted on floating in the warm water on her good days. Marcus could still see her there, bald head gleaming in the afternoon sun, laughing as she pretended to be a mermaid despite the port in her chest. "I know, Dad. Jake's voice broke entirely. "She's going to be okay, right? The treatment in Germany, it's going to work?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Dr. Reeves had been clear about the experimental therapy's success rates, promising but not guaranteed. 60% survival rate, but it cost more than most people made in 2 years. The pool represented Emma's past. Selling his house's most valuable feature might secure her future. "It has to work," Marcus said finally, raising the sledgehammer above his head. The first blow cracked the decorative tiles around the pool's edge. The sound echoed through the quiet suburban neighborhood like a gunshot. Marcus had started early, hoping to avoid disturbing anyone, but he should have known better. Karen Whitmore seemed to have a sixth sense for anything happening on their street that didn't meet her approval. "Marcus Chen, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Her shrill voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Marcus lowered the sledgehammer and turned to see his neighbor standing at the fence line, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair catching the morning light. At 52, Karen had the kind of aggressive maintenance that money could buy and the personality of someone who'd never faced real adversity. "Good morning, Karen. I'm removing my pool." "Without permits? Without notification?" Her voice climbed higher with each word. "This is going to destroy everyone's property values. You can't just tear up your backyard like some kind of hillbilly." Marcus felt Jake tense beside him. His son had inherited his mother's quick temper, the one trait Marcus wished he'd missed. Before Jake could respond, Marcus placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Karen, I filed all the necessary paperwork with the city. This is my property, and I have every right to modify it as I see fit. Your rights end where my property values begin." Karen's face was flushing red now, the way it always did when she didn't get her way immediately. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, and I will not stand by while you turn it into some kind of what?" Marcus's patience, already stretched thin by months of stress, began to fray. "Some kind of place where people make hard choices to save their children's lives?" Karen's eyes narrowed. She'd heard about Emma's diagnosis through the neighborhood gossip network, but sympathy had never been her strong suit. "Your personal problems don't give you the right to destroy property values for everyone else. If you can't afford to maintain your home properly, maybe you should consider moving somewhere more appropriate for your circumstances." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Appropriate for his circumstances. As if having a sick child was some kind of moral failing that required banishment from decent society. Jake stepped forward, his young face twisted with rage. "You heartless—" "Jake, no," Marcus's voice carried the authority of years of parenting, but inside, he was fighting his own battle against the urge to tell Karen exactly what he thought of her priorities. Go inside and check on your sister. But Dad, go! Jake shot Karen a look that could have melted steel before stalking back toward the house. Marcus watched him go, then turned back to his neighbor. Karen, I understand you're concerned about property values, but my daughter is dying. This pool represents $50,000 that could save her life. If that's not appropriate for your neighborhood standards, then maybe we have different definitions of what matters. For a moment, something flickered across Karen's face, a shadow of recognition, perhaps even shame. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the iron determination of someone who'd never learned to back down. I'm sorry about Emma, truly I am. But that doesn't give you carte blanche to do whatever you want. There are procedures, Marcus, standards. This neighborhood has a certain character, and if we let everyone just tear up their properties whenever they face financial difficulties. Financial difficulties. Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. Now. Is that what you call watching your 8-year-old daughter fight for her life? Karen crossed her arms. I call it life, Marcus. Bad things happen to everyone. That doesn't mean the rest of us should have to pay for it through decreased property values. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, trying to process the casual cruelty of her words. In the 3 years since Emma's diagnosis, he'd encountered many responses to their situation: pity, sympathy, awkward avoidance, even anger at life's unfairness. But Karen's response was something else entirely. A cold calculation that his daughter's life was worth less than the theoretical impact on her home's resale value. You know what, Karen? You're right about one thing. We do have different standards. He turned back to the pool and raised the sledgehammer again. The second blow sent chunks of tile flying, and the third cracked the concrete beneath. Each impact felt like a small release of the rage and helplessness that had been building inside him for months. I'm calling the city, Karen shouted over the sound of destruction. And the homeowners association. This is unacceptable. Marcus didn't stop. The fourth blow opened a larger crack, and the fifth sent a spiderweb of fractures across the pool's shallow end. Years of frustration, at insurance companies that denied claims, at doctors who offered hope with one hand and bills with the other, at a world that seemed designed to punish families for having sick children, poured out through the sledgehammer. And if that doesn't work, Karen continued, her voice now carrying the particular venom of someone who'd found their weapon, I'll call the police. Destruction of property, disturbing the peace, operating without proper permits. We'll see how appropriate your behavior seems when you're explaining it to officers. Marcus paused, sledgehammer raised above his head. The only property being destroyed is mine, Karen, and I have every permit I need. Do you? Her smile was sharp and predatory. Because I happen to know that noise ordinances restrict construction activities before 9 a.m. on weekends. It's currently 7:30. That's a citation right there. Marcus lowered the sledgehammer slowly. He'd been so focused on getting the work done early, trying to minimize disruption, that he hadn't considered the specific timing restrictions. And, Karen continued, sensing victory, I also know that major landscape modifications require neighbor notification in this municipality, which you failed to provide. I'm removing the pool, not building one. The regulations require notification for any landscape modification that could impact drainage, property lines, or neighborhood aesthetics. A pool removal certainly qualifies. Marcus felt a cold weight settling in his chest. Karen wasn't just being petty. She'd done her homework. She knew exactly which regulations to cite, which procedures to invoke. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst of neighborhood concern. This was a calculated attack. Karen, please, my daughter. Your daughter is not my responsibility, Marcus. My property values are. The words hung in the air between them like a physical barrier. Marcus understood now that there would be no reasoning with her, no appeal to basic human decency. Karen had made her choice, and she was going to war. I see. Marcus set the sledgehammer down carefully. Well, Then I guess we understand each other. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Karen's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who believed she'd won. Now, I suggest you stop this nonsense and find a more appropriate way to handle your situation. Marcus looked at the pool, then at the crack he'd managed to open in its surface. Such a small mark against something that had once seemed so permanent. But every journey began with a single step. Every wall fell one blow at a time. Actually, Karen, I think there's B. The police cruiser pulled into Marcus's driveway with deliberate authority, its red and blue lights painting the morning in official colors. Officer Janet Rodriguez stepped out first, followed by her partner, a younger man whose nameplate read, Thompson. Marcus could see Karen standing on her front porch, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who believed justice was finally being served. Mr. Chen? Officer Rodriguez approached with the cautious professionalism of someone who'd handled enough domestic disputes to know that neighborhoods could be battlefields. We received a complaint about noise violations and potential property destruction. Marcus wiped concrete dust from his hands on his jeans. The phone call from Germany still felt surreal, like something that had happened to someone else. Emma wouldn't need the pool money anymore. She was going to live. Officer, I'm removing my own pool from my own property. I have all the necessary permits. At 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday? Karen's voice carried across the yard. Disturbing the entire neighborhood with that racket? Officer Rodriguez glanced toward Karen, then back at Marcus. She'd been doing this job for 12 years, long enough to recognize the dynamics at play. Sir, can I see those permits? Marcus pulled the folded papers from his back pocket. As Rodriguez examined them, her partner wandered over to inspect the pool damage. The shallow end looked like a war zone, chunks of concrete and tile scattered across the deck. These look in order, Rodriguez said, handing the permits back. But there is the matter of the noise ordinance. Construction activities are restricted, before 9 a.m. on weekends. I understand, officer. I was trying to get the work done early to minimize disruption, but I see now that backfired. Karen had descended from her porch and was approaching with the confident stride of someone who believed she held all the cards. Officer, this man has been terrorizing the neighborhood for months with his situation, property values, noise complaints, and now this destruction. Ma'am, Officer Rodriguez held up a hand. Let me handle this. But Karen was just getting started. Do you have any idea what this kind of behavior does to a neighborhood? We have standards here, officer. Standards that some people seem to think don't apply to them just because they're going through difficult times. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. The joy from Dr. Muller's call was still there, but Karen's words were like acid on an open wound. Even now, even with Emma's future secured, she couldn't let it go. Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Thompson said, consulting his notepad. You called in several complaints. Noise violation, property destruction, and, let me see, suspicious behavior. Threatening neighborhood safety? That's right. This man has been acting erratically for weeks, staying up all night, making phone calls at all hours, and now this violent destruction. Violent destruction? Marcus's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath. I'm removing my own pool with my own tools on my own property. With a sledgehammer, like some kind of maniac. Officer Rodriguez stepped between them. She'd seen enough of these neighborhood feuds to know when they were about to explode. Let's all take a step back here. Officer, Karen continued, her voice rising, I have documented evidence of this man's declining mental state. The late-night phone calls, the crying, the inability to maintain his property. Crying? Marcus repeated the word like he couldn't quite process it. Oh yes, I've heard you. All hours of the night sobbing like a child. It's disturbing and frankly pathetic for a grown man. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Those late-night phone calls had been with insurance companies, with doctors, with the German hospital. The crying had been grief and fear and exhaustion, the sound of a father watching his daughter waste away and feeling powerless to stop it. You've been listening to me cry? It's hard not to hear when you're carrying on like that. Thin walls, you know. I've been documenting it all for the HOA. Disturbing the peace, failure to maintain property standards, and now this. You've been documenting my grief? Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, but something in his tone made both officers tense. Karen, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, pressed on. Someone has to maintain standards in this neighborhood. We can't have people just falling apart because life gets difficult. There are proper ways to handle these things, proper places for people who can't cope. Mrs. Whitmore. Officer Rodriguez's voice cut through Karen's rant like a blade. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that a man who can't handle his responsibilities, who cries at all hours and destroys property with sledgehammers, might not be fit to... She stopped abruptly, but the implication hung in the air, like poison gas. Fit to what? Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. Karen's eyes flickered with uncertainty for the first time. She'd gone too far, and she knew it, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. Fit to make rational decisions about his family's welfare. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the morning birds seemed to have stopped singing. Officer Thompson cleared his throat. Ma'am, are you suggesting that Mr. Chen is unfit to care for his children? I'm suggesting that someone should look into the situation. For the children's sake, you understand. A man who's clearly having a breakdown, who can't maintain his property, who's trying to save his daughter's life. The voice came from behind them. Jake had emerged from the house, his young face set with determination and barely controlled rage. Behind him, moving slowly but steadily, came Emma. Marcus's heart clenched at the sight of his daughter. 8 years old and bald from chemotherapy, she wore a pink knit cap that couldn't quite hide the port in her chest. She was thin, almost translucent, but her eyes burned with the same determination he'd seen in her mother. Emma, sweetheart, you should be resting. I heard the sirens, Daddy. Her voice was small but clear. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Karen stared at the little girl, and for a moment her mask slipped entirely. The petty anger, the calculated cruelty, all of it crumbled as she looked at Emma's frail form. This is my daughter, Marcus said quietly. This is why I was removing the pool, to pay for experimental treatment in Germany that might save her life. Emma walked over to her father and took his hand. Her fingers were cold and thin, but her grip was firm. It's okay, Daddy. Dr. Muller called Jake while you were outside. I heard him tell Jake that we don't need the pool money anymore. Officer Rodriguez looked between Marcus and Emma, then at Karen, who had gone very still. Is that right, Mr. Chen? Marcus nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Emma leaned against his leg, and he could feel how light she'd become, how fragile. The American Pediatric Leukemia Foundation is paying for everything, Jake said, his voice cracking with emotion. They called this morning. Emma gets to go to Germany, and she's going to get better. Karen was staring at Emma with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Horror, maybe, or shame, or the dawning realization of what she'd just tried to do. So you see, officer, Marcus said, finding his voice again, the pool removal isn't necessary anymore. My daughter is going to live, and I don't need to sell my house's most valuable feature to pay for it. Officer Thompson was scribbling notes, but Officer Rodriguez was watching Karen with the sharp attention of someone who'd seen too many ugly sides of human nature. Mrs. Whitmore, Rodriguez said carefully, given this information, do you still want to press charges for the noise? Violation? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at Emma, who was still holding her father's hand and watching her with the clear, honest gaze that only children possessed. Karen's voice faltered. I was just trying to... Trying to what? Emma asked with the innocent curiosity of childhood. Trying to help Daddy? The question hung in the air like a judgment. Karen looked at the little girl, really looked at her for the first time, and saw what everyone else saw, a child fighting for her life, supported by a father who would tear down mountains to save her. Mrs. Whitmore? Officer Rodriguez prompted. Karen's face was cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Shame, anger, confusion, and something that might have been recognition of her own behavior. "I think," she said slowly, "there may have been a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Jake asked, his voice sharp with adolescent anger. "The kind where you called my dad mentally unstable for trying to save my sister's life?" "Jake," Marcus warned, but his son was just getting started. "No, Dad, she needs to hear this. You want to know what those late-night phone calls were, lady? They were insurance companies hanging up on us. They were doctors in Germany trying to coordinate care across 8 time zones. They were my dad. Calling his brother at 3 a.m. because he was so scared he couldn't breathe." Emma squeezed Marcus's hand tighter. "Daddy gets scared sometimes, but he's still the best daddy in the world." Officer Rodriguez looked at Karen with undisguised disgust. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think we're done here." But Karen wasn't finished. The shame and recognition that had flickered across her face were being rapidly replaced by defensive anger. She'd been exposed, humiliated in front of the police and the entire neighborhood, and people like Karen Whitmore didn't handle humiliation well. "You know what?" she said, her voice rising again. "I don't care about your sobs, though." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the departure lounge of Frankfurt Airport, watching Emma sleep in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside him. The flight from Los Angeles had been long, but she'd handled it better than expected. The experimental treatment had already begun, showing promising results. Her energy was returning, and for the first time in months, she'd asked for seconds at dinner. "Dad?" Jake looked up from his phone, where he'd been texting updates to friends back home. "Mom just sent a message. She says Karen's moving out today." Marcus wasn't surprised. The neighborhood gossip network had been churning for weeks with updates on Karen's spectacular downfall. The custody battle had been swift and decisive. Her ex-husband's attorney had presented a devastating case built around her harassment of the Chen family. The recordings she'd made of Marcus's late-night phone calls, which she'd thought were evidence of his instability, had instead become evidence of her own violation of privacy laws. "Where's she going?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he cared. "Some apartment across town. Apparently, she lost the house in the settlement, too. Mom says the for sale sign went up yesterday." Emma stirred in her chair, blinking sleepily. "Are we talking about the mean lady?" "Not mean," Marcus said gently, settling into the chair beside her. "Just lost. Some people get so focused on the wrong things that they forget what really matters." "Is that why she was mad at us?" Marcus considered how to explain adult pettiness to a child who'd faced death with more grace than most people faced minor inconveniences. "I think she was scared, sweetheart. Sometimes when people are scared of their own problems, they try to make everyone else's problems seem bigger." Emma nodded with the solemn understanding of someone who'd learned too much about fear too early. "I used to be scared of the treatments, but then I remembered that being scared doesn't change anything except how you feel." Jake smiled at his sister. "When did you get so wise?" "When I realized I was going to live," Emma said simply. The words hit Marcus with unexpected force. His daughter, his brave, brilliant daughter, had faced her own mortality and emerged with wisdom that most adults never achieved. She understood that fear and anger were choices, that focusing on what mattered was a decision you made every day. "Mr. Chen?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Reeves, Emma's oncologist from Los Angeles, was approaching with a small group of people Marcus didn't recognize. "Dr. Reeves, what are you doing here?" The older man smiled. "I wanted to be here when Emma starts her treatment, but that's not the only reason." He gestured to the group behind him. "I'd like you to meet some people. This is Maria Santos from the American Pediatric Leukemia Foundation, David Kim from the Children's Cancer Research Institute, and Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News." Marcus felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. "I'm not sure we're ready for—" "Dad," Jake interrupted, "you should hear what they have to say." Maria Santos stepped forward. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the manner of someone who'd spent years working with families in crisis. "Mr. Chen, your son's letter to our foundation was extraordinary. Not just because of Emma's medical situation, but because of how he described your family's response to adversity. Jake's letter? He wrote about watching you tear down your pool to save Emma's life, about the sacrifices you've made, the strength you've shown. But more than that, he wrote about how you've maintained your dignity and compassion even when others haven't shown you the same courtesy. Marcus glanced at Jake, who was trying to look nonchalant but failing miserably. You wrote about Karen? I wrote about you, Jake said firmly. About how you never said a bad word about her, even when she was... He struggled for words that wouldn't upset Emma. Even when she was being difficult. Dr. Reeves picked up the explanation. Jake's letter went viral within the foundation. Community. It's been shared with pediatric oncology units across the country as an example of how families can maintain hope and humanity in the darkest circumstances. Which brings us to why we're here, David Kim added. The Children's Cancer Research Institute wants to fund a new program, the Emma Chen Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Support. It would provide not just medical funding, but family support. Services for parents dealing with their children's diagnoses. Marcus felt the world spinning around him. I don't understand. We want to hire you, Maria Santos said simply, to run the program, to help other families navigate what you've been through. Your experience, your perspective, your grace under pressure. These are exactly what other parents need to see. Emma sat up straighter in her chair. Daddy would be helping other sick kids? Other families like yours, Jennifer Walsh confirmed. Families who need someone who understands what they're going through. Someone who's walked that path and come out the other side. Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him. Medical, professionals, journalists, foundation executives, all looking at him with expectation and respect. A year ago, he'd been an insurance adjuster living a quiet suburban life. Now they wanted him to become the public face of childhood cancer advocacy. I need to think about this. Of course, Dr. Reeves said. But while you're thinking, there's something else you should know. The story of your neighbor's behavior has also gotten attention. There's been significant discussion about how communities can better support families dealing with medical crises. What kind of discussion? Jennifer Walsh stepped forward. The kind that leads to policy changes. Your neighborhood is implementing new guidelines about harassment of families with medical situations. Other communities are following suit. Karen Whitmore's behavior, ironically, has become a case study in what not to do. Jake was grinning now. Dad, you're famous. Well, kind of famous. Good famous. Emma giggled. The first truly carefree sound Marcus had heard from her in months. Can I be famous too? You already are, sweetheart, Maria Santos said. Your story has inspired thousands of people. Parents who were giving up hope have found strength in hearing about your family's journey. But I didn't do anything special, Emma protested. I just tried not to be scared all the time. That, Dr. Reeves said gently, is one of the most special things a person can do. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. Without thinking, he glanced at it and felt his blood pressure spike. The message was from Karen. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that Emma's story helped me realize some things about myself. I'm getting help. Real help. I'm sorry for everything I put your family through. I hope Emma gets better. She deserves better than what I showed her. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Jake noticed his expression. Everything okay, Dad? Yeah, Marcus said, putting the phone away. Everything's fine. He decided not to share Karen's message. Emma didn't need to carry the weight of adult apologies, and Jake's anger was still too fresh. But something about the text suggested that Karen's journey toward becoming a better person might be just beginning, even as theirs was entering a new chapter. Mr. Chen? Maria Santos prompted gently. About the foundation position? Marcus looked at Emma, who was watching him with bright, hopeful eyes. Then at Jake, who was trying to hide his pride but failing spectacularly. These two amazing human beings had been shaped by adversity into people of extraordinary character, and now they wanted to help shape him into something more than he'd ever imagined he could be. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. This foundation, would it help prevent what happened with our neighbor? Would it educate communities about how to support families instead of judging them? That would be a major component, yes, David Kim confirmed. Community education, family advocacy, support network development. We want to change how society responds to childhood illness. Marcus felt something settling into place inside his chest, a sense of purpose that went beyond survival, beyond just getting through each day. For months, he'd been focused on saving Emma's life. Now he was being offered the chance to help save other families' lives, too. Then yes, he said simply. I'll do it. Emma clapped her hands together. Daddy's going to be a superhero! Not a superhero, sweetheart. Just a dad who learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us can be turned into the best things we do for others. Jake rolled his eyes at the sentiment, but Marcus could see the pride shining in his son's face. Does this mean we get to stay in Germany while Emma gets better? For as long as she needs, Dr. Reeves confirmed, and the foundation will cover all your expenses. This is going to be a long-term commitment. Good, Emma said firmly. I like it here. The doctors are nice, and nobody cares if I wear hats. All the time. As they gathered their belongings to head to the hospital, Marcus reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. 3 weeks ago, he'd been destroying his pool to pay for Emma's treatment, enduring the cruelty of a neighbor who saw his daughter's illness as a property value problem. Now Emma was getting world-class care at no cost. He was being offered a job that could help thousands of families, and even Karen was apparently working to become a better person. Dad? Emma tugged on his sleeve as they walked through the airport. Do you think the mean lady, Karen, do you think she'll be okay? Marcus considered the question seriously. Emma had a way of asking,